Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa. We just finished watching part 3, so the 3 parts of round 1. Coming up next is going to be the part 2, which is the round 2, which is actually where the candidates ask each other questions. Let's go to our adjudicators, Nicole Curato, Glenn Tuazon, Joan De Venecia. What did you guys think of round 1? First, let's talk about part 3. Anything interesting in part 3?
I think the best part was when Mar Rojas said this is the Duterte brand of justice. Shooting from the hip, basically punishing people without thinking about it. We heard the word kill and death so many times in that round. So I think just to a certain extent, Mar Rojas did something good in this round by bringing out what's wrong with the Duterte brand of justice.
On the other hand, do you think Mar may have broken a little bit under the strain? He seemed to be slightly more
Off kilter.
maybe a bit more aggressive but higher pitched at this time. I think that's the politically correct way to put it. Glenn, what you were saying earlier?
It's funny because before we went on the last segment, I was saying that Mar Rojas was losing his cool, so he seemed a bit antsy. I also got that a bit from this last round, although I tend to disagree a bit. I think that he was, well, no, actually I agree with Nicole. I thought he was more, he came off stronger for this segment. The sound bites were clear. I think he defended himself quite aggressively. And then it was funny because I was saying that Mayor Duterte was getting points in the prior rounds by not joining into the exchanges. This time he went full into the fray. Let's see how that will resonate with his supporters. Because I think though that this entire I will be strong, if you're president, you have to be ready to take certain measures. That resonates with the supporters. So if you believe in that kind of act, then it's kind of justice, then that's going to embolden you more. Especially with the death penalty question at the last. Yeah?
For the first 2 parts though of this round, all 3 of you felt that Grace Poe took the debate. For this last part of the first round, do you guys agree, John?
Well, overall, I think she still won the first round, but by a very close margin because of her answer on the Coco Levy issue.
Right.
I don't know. I thought that she was boxed in a corner and she really didn't respond. There was an intention to evade, and she said things that I thought were ultimately defending Bending Coangco and the Coco Levy issue. So, well, that was to me a bit disappointing on her part, but taking the 3 parts of round 1, I thought she still won that.
Who's number 2 for you?
Well, I would say that it would be VP Binay because he came out swinging on a lot of issues, and I thought that he actually explained a lot more on tax reform and infra, for instance, and he really explained why tax reform does not mean lagging behind in infra, because you have compensatory measures that would actually allow for the government to get money, collect more money, so that it could kind of balance the tax reform measures that it would be undertaking.
Nicole, do you agree?
Yes, to a certain extent, although I think the biggest missed opportunity of VP Binay here is to precisely explain why he never showed up in Senate, why he never explained the corruption allegations. He didn't do that in this debate either, except for that symbolic
It was a grand gesture, yes.
And of course,
which almost worked, I think.
I don't know what the impact of that to a lot of people, but it's definitely a spectacular gesture for him to say, look, I'm waiving all of these things. But yeah, I think I'll agree with John for second place. I'd give it to VP Binay.
And Patricia?
I'm very curious as to if you have a first place or largely maybe a second place. Glenn, who do you think did worst in this debate? If you're willing to answer that question.
Wow. Well, actually,
Or missed the most opportunities.
that's a fair question because I tend to agree with my 2 co-panelists that maybe the ones who came off strongest were Senator Poe and Vice President Binay. So between Mayor Duterte and Secretary Rojas, I think it's well, I really can't decide at this point. I'm not hedging. I just really can't decide at this point. But it's a matter of the strategy. If you look at Mayor Duterte, he tended to insert himself in strategic points. That could be strategic, but that could also be a missed opportunity to insert his voice and get more airtime. Secretary Rojas was more in the middle, especially towards the end. But as we have discussed extensively, I don't know if the defensive tone would sit well, especially with undecided voters.
Nicole, do you think that Duterte came in swinging on the last round, at least for this particular round? We already discussed how he was rather quiet for the first couple of rounds. Do you think this was effective?
I think it's very strategic if he's doing it purposefully to use interruption. I mean, I wrote a piece for Rappler about how interruption is so important, and here you can see Mayor Duterte being very strategic, if it's deliberate, on interrupting Senator DILG Secretary Rojas, for example. At certain points, he was able to bring in the Wharton issue, even if that wasn't the point of the debate, and he was very successful in getting Secretary Rojas to talk about that. So I think to a certain extent, it's very clever. It didn't only give spice to the debate, but it gave him kind of some power to frame the debate in a way that he wants it to go.
And I think a major issue for everyone on this table was the fact that everyone said no to divorce across the board.
Yes.
I was surprised about that because I saw in some interviews that I think Senator Poe and Mayor Duterte were for same-sex marriage, if I'm not mistaken.
But not divorce.
And not divorce. I always thought that divorce would be more acceptable to us as Catholics than same-sex marriage. So that confused me a bit and very disappointing, a personal opinion.
I think we need to add at this point that Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago is for divorce.
That's right.
And as we noticed earlier in the
She
debate,
tweeted.
she
tweeted
but
you.
not just that. She has been, or her staff has been tweeting of her opinions on most questions of the debate. So
She's answering.
participating through Twitter. But what is the implication when everyone says we're against divorce? What does it say about...
They're all scared. They're
It's
all
a very careful gesture. You
Precisely.
don't want to alienate the Catholic majority.
Is it more interesting that Davao Mayor Rodrigo Duterte, who talks repeatedly about his many women, said he had a first wife, a second wife, is it telling that he is unwilling to support divorce?
I don't know. I mean, Rappler can fact check it, what he said about divorce in the past. But I think he has been generally supportive of same-sex marriage and other progressive policies.
That's what I recall.
So it's kind of surprising that, when you're pushed to the wall to put your position clearly, you'd say no to divorce. I mean, that's weird. I thought his position on divorce is as clear as his position on death penalty. I would have wanted something stronger from him, considering he does have this track record of arguing for progressive policies, except for death squads. Just to put that on record. That irony on record.
Pulling out in terms of issues that resonate, which ones resonated in part one?
I think Yolanda is a very important issue to talk about, precisely because this is an opportunity for Secretary Rojas to show that he is actually a leader. He is at the forefront of Yolanda and reconstruction and just immediate response. And there's this expectation that this could be his moment, because it's true that he was right there during Yolanda, and he has this opportunity to defend his track record. And this is where the interruption of Mayor Duterte is very interesting, because he
Very
will say,
strategic insertion.
Right.
he can't handle that. This wasn't his exact words, but he was saying something like he was almost on a meltdown, like he couldn't handle.
I think he may have said that earlier about...
In a different
Yeah,
context,
in a different
yes.
context.
Or he said that he's a fraud.
Yes, precisely.
In that context, who,
Pretensions.
who won the exchange?
I think Secretary Mar tried to defend himself by saying, and this is a narrative he keeps saying, I was there 3 weeks before.
He smelled the stench of
I
dead
smelled the
bodies.
stench of death. Although it seemed a little odd this time. I smelled the stench of death. I saw many dead bodies, and I sent a number of food packs. It was an odd correlation, an odd mental image. But I don't know. Do you feel that he won that exchange?
No, I think Mayor Duterte won that exchange for me. It was a debate on figures.
Yes.
So where did the 4 billion go? Where did the
Right.
70 billion go? I think Secretary Rojas had an attempt to draw the lines of where this fund went, where this amount went to, etc. But maybe a clear answer would have benefited him. But of course, it was a strategic insertion on the part of Mayor Duterte to question. It's like a cross-examination.
Yes.
Parang lawyer, di ba? You start casting doubt. And the moment that you cast doubt and you have a public that is also asking questions about this very fund, then that puts you in a precarious position. So I don't think Secretary Rojas was able to massage that challenge as well.
And in fact, I think Mayor Duterte, Vice President Binay, and Grace Poe had the united strategy in one front. That is demystifying Tuwid na Daan, because all three of them were consistent in hitting Tuwid na Daan on different levels. First, DILG, you're late in liquidating COA.
Yeah.
COA report.
Yes.
Selective justice when it comes to allies. You just prey on the weak, the latak. I thought it was genius the way Grace Poe used the word latak. And you keep the well-entrenched people safe. Yolanda, what did you do in Yolanda? And Mayor Duterte asking, so do you know what people do in Bilibid? Only for Mar Rojas to say, well, that's office of the president. Or PIDEA, that's not under me.
Yeah.
So I thought that all three of them had a strategy. I don't know whether conscious or united or they talked about it, but all three of them were really determined to hit tuwid na daan. And I thought all three were effective in doing that with Mar because he was very, very defensive and high-pitched already when defending himself at times. So
Though it's interesting, it feels like no one is trying to ask questions to Mayor Duterte. Like no one has been equally
That's true.
confrontational.
That's very
And
true.
If everyone has a shot at winning the presidency, then how come all the attacks are against
Yeah.
each other? VP Binay, Grace Poe, and Secretary Mar. Where is the attack against Mayor Duterte?
I think the only attack against Mayor Duterte was Secretary Rojas is in defense of himself.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
So on the killing, on Davao and everything else. But really, you're absolutely right. There was no attack
Actually,
against
he mentioned the
Duterte.
line, I wrote it here, if hindi ka takot pumatay,
Yes.
hindi ka handang maging presidente. I thought that would have invited more
Yes.
questions
Precisely.
Yeah.
from the rest of the
Yeah.
candidates.
Which Maro has replied to naman, na parang he said,
did,
that's the Duterte
that's
plan.
Duterte justice. Pero it was that's it, no?
Yes, yeah.
And it should be a shocking statement that
Yes.
your standard for a
I was
president
shocked.
is someone who's not terrified of killing. I would prefer a president personally, anyway, or at least from a human rights perspective, that should be afraid of killing, that will kill us at last resort. But no candidate stood for that, which is, I think, interesting.
I don't know if that's a strategy. Or are they afraid to take on Mayor Duterte?
That's also
That's
possible.
interesting.
Are they?
He's really charismatic, I think. That's what he comes across as. Not just in this debate,
Right,
but
yeah.
in prior sorties.
Right.
It's hard because he can turn it into a strategy of turning it into a joke,
Right.
getting the crowd to turn against you. That's his skill.
Yeah,
That's
he
his
can
strategy.
reduce you to a tiny character and say,
To
I'm
a
laughing at you,
caricature.
Right.
and you're beneath me. He seems very good at this sort of thing.
He's skilled in that respect, no?
So I want to ask you guys your reaction to this, the results of the editors aligned with you in terms of giving the round one to Grace Poe. Rappler online poll is Duterte. Facebook, the share of voice is Duterte, and underneath here, on Twitter share of voice, it's actually Jejomar Binay.
Right.
Okay.
Your thoughts on that?
But I think we also have to reflect as a panel. I mean, from which perspective are we coming from when we say Grace Poe is the best debater in this round? It's because we are debaters, and Grace
Correct.
Poe was a trained debater.
Right.
So the matter, manner, method.
Say it again.
Is
Matter,
manner and method is very much clear with how she explains her ideas. So her manner is aggressive but elegant. Her matter is complete. She has all of these statistics. Her logic is kind of sound, except for the Coco Levy part, maybe.
Yes.
Right.
And then her method is very clear. So idea, example, or idea, argument, example. So it's very clear. So I think my reflection here is, yes, that style works if you're talking to people who have experience with debate. So I think that's the perspective that we offer.
Joan?
Well, I am not surprised about the large share in social media footprint of the Duterte supporters. This is not the first time that we've seen it happen. And I think it's just a continuation. These are volunteers who really believe in their candidates. So I think that's fair. I don't question the statistics there.
And I think Glenn and everyone else
Not
has
surprised.
discussed the enormous charisma that Davao Mayor Duterte has. And I think that reflects very much on social media, which is also largely emotional.
Do you think that this kind of engagement translates into votes?
I have no idea.
Yeah, this is really
This is new.
really the new, how big a role will social media play in terms of influencing votes, in terms of the exercise of democracy.
I don't know if there's a survey that already shows that those who are active in social media are registered voters, for one thing. Is there a one-to-one correspondence, or are those active in social media the ones who vote, or the majority of the voters in the elections? Because if yes, then it would probably play a big role, but if not, then
I mean, the biggest proxy here would be the surveys.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
the Grace Poe supporters aren't as active in social media, but she is a consistent frontrunner in the surveys. So just at least based on those two data sets, then we can say maybe not necessarily. But what's important is the action in social media can frame the conversation.
Correct.
And how the conversation is framed can frame how people make their selections for who they're voting for. But I guess only to that extent.
So what's so interesting to me is
Okay.
that this would be the statistical surveys that you have, right? And you can kind of see how they've done over time. But what's more interesting is we actually have 3 online polls on Facebook, on Twitter,
Right.
on Rappler itself, and SMS is the third one. And those since December, every month, have actually shown Duterte. And the last one, the last statistical survey, have shown his largest rise. Is that one way of seeing engagement translating into the statistical survey results, or too soon to tell? Too soon to tell.
Too soon
Maybe
to
too soon to
tell.
tell.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe after the elections.
Okay, we're going back to the last round. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much. We're going back to round 2. Here we go.